There are basically no guitar kits out there that are 335 guitars, and I'm going to explain what I'm talking about. If you watch my last video, you'll know that this guitar looks a lot different than it did in that video, and that's because I've stripped the finish off the front and the back. I've still got the sides and the neck to go. And it does have some scorch marks, but that doesn't really matter because I'm going to finish it in a solid color, so you'll never see those. Now I'm going to put some images on the screen of what this guitar looked like before. It started its life out as an ES-335 inspired by Gibson, figure top in raspberry tea burst. Now, I will admit that this is a beautiful color, however, it's really just not my bag. I guess I prefer the more traditional, I guess you would call it tobacco burst finish, you know, the one with like the black around the edges. Now you'll see that the guitar is a Bigsby and you might notice some other minor differences. I'll explain all that later, but you get the idea. Now this video isn't necessarily about this guitar, but I have to sort of preface what it is and why I'm doing this. The goal here is to morph or modify this guitar into something like the Gibson Chris Cornell signature guitar in olive drab green with the Bigsby and the Filtertrons. Now I just was sort of jonesing for this guitar for a long time, and I thought, how can I kind of make this happen without spending around, who knows, $7,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 I think they're going for these days. I could maybe go the custom shop route, but you're still talking $5,000 to $6,000. So I had the idea, maybe I will buy a kit guitar, and that's sort of where this video comes in. But before I get into that, I have to say that I'm putting together a playlist, a series of videos. The playlist is going to be linked below of the modifications I'm doing to the guitar. For example, stripping the polyurethane off of the guitar, even with the binding and not melting it, how I'm getting around that, putting on the Bigsby, the electronics, widening the binding, giving the allure of a wider binding. Of course, bridge post, I'm going to have to fill in these holes with dowels, and there's just a variety of things that I'm going to have to get into. I'm even going to change or shape the headstock, get rid of this Epiphone, even though it's more like the Gibson now than it used to be. I'm going to also modify that. All that to say, these are going to be individual videos deep diving into each topic. So if you're only interested in one, you can just watch that video. Or if you want to see the whole project, you can watch the entire playlist. So on to the topic at hand. When I started looking into how to pull this off, I was thinking maybe I could buy a kit guitar and just have it unfinished and, you know, do the preparation, spray it. And the goal here is to do this in nitrocellulose like the Gibson would be. But yeah, I thought I could just start out with a kit guitar, sort of build it from the ground up, finish it in the color I wanted, put nitrocellulose clear coat on, do all that stuff, and end up with something that was pretty much the same, at least in form and function, to the Chris Cornell signature guitar. However, when I began looking into the kits and doing some research, I began to realize that there are basically no guitar kits out there that are 335 guitars, and I'm going to explain what I'm talking about. First, we have to start out by defining what an ES-335 actually is. So from Gibson originally and to this day, basically, there are, you know, a number of things that are involved and have to be there for it to be a 335. Now, of course, there are other 335 variations. There's the 345, the 355, and on, but I'm just talking about essentially the basics here, and not like a 339, which is a smaller body, but, you know, in general, we're talking about a 335 guitar. So some of those things are, for example, the top and the back have to be some sort of ply or laminate veneer combination of maple, poplar, and maple. Usually the Gibson, for example, does the 3 layers, maple, poplar, and maple. Epiphone, for example, does 5 layers of, I guess, maple, poplar, and maple, but it has to be just something like that, right? The other thing is the shape of the guitar, right? So it has to look pretty much like this. And by looking like this, I also mean the dimensions. So it can't be like a lot shorter or narrower, or like the 339, for example, which is just a smaller body. It has to have this general shape. Now, even Gibson, the ears or the horns of the 335s have varied over the years. There's the more pointy version and there's the more rounded, I guess the Mickey Mouse ear version. But in general, it has to have this basic shape. Another thing, it has to have a 12-inch radius fretboard. This is very common to Gibson. That's pretty much all they do. So it can't be 10 or 9.5 or 16, for example, if you really want a 335. Another thing is the inlays. So the 335 traditionally has either dots or blocks. It doesn't have trapezoids. There is a version, I think 345 has parallelograms, but regardless, all the inlays start on the 3rd fret and not the 1st fret. So those are the basic things. Now the headstock is a matter of preference. I said, for example, that I'm going to change this headstock. I don't necessarily like the Epiphone headstock. I prefer the Gibson shape. So, you know, you might like the Gibson shape. Maybe you would put a different logo on it. You might not care at all. Maybe you want a paddle headstock or something just different. Like I said, it's a matter of preference, and I wouldn't hold that against anybody in saying that their guitar is essentially a 335. Okay, so now that we know what a 335 is at its core, and it's not really that many things, you would think that these kit guitars out there would be able to nail the essence of a 335, but that is not the case, and like I said, I will explain. But hopefully you can see why I went the Epiphone route. It was essentially my only option unless I wanted to spend thousands of dollars on a real Gibson, which I could afford, but I have other things I need to spend my money on, and I also have some time. I have this YouTube channel, and I wanted to make a project out of it. Now, having said all that, let's get into these kits and how they miss the mark. Now, some of them have a lot of features that are essential to a 335, but they have one or two other features that miss the mark entirely. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the computer. We'll take a look at some of these specific websites and see how these kits sort of fail as a 335. But before that, I must say I'm not knocking these as guitars. I can't speak to their playability, their sound, their build quality, any of that. And even if they're not 335s, that doesn't mean they're not a good guitar. So I have to say that I'm just specifically talking about whether or not these kits are even in the ballpark of being something that you could call a 335. Yes, they may be a semi-hollow guitar, and that's fine, but a lot of these actually call themselves 335s, and they're really not. So let's take a deeper dive into this. So let's begin with what's arguably the most popular of the kits, and that is the StewMac Kit. Interestingly enough, before we get into this, I have to say that I just got an email recently from StewMac saying that more or less Gibson, they don't call out Gibson or say that specifically, but they say an unnamed guitar manufacturer has sent them a letter or something to the effect of, hey, you can't sell these anymore because it violates, you know, our patents or our rights to these shapes and things like that. So more or less, Gibson is not letting them sell these kits anymore. So they are going to be on sale and probably are only going to stock what's left. So if you want one of these, you know, you better grab it fast because they're not going to be around a long time. So some of the similarities of the StewMac Kit are the fact that it has a flame maple veneer top. It doesn't say that I can see what the layers of veneer are, and it does have a mahogany neck. That's something I totally glossed over in the previous part of this video, but a 335 must have, or historically has, a mahogany neck, and this StewMac Kit has that. The headstock is actually very close to Gibson. It would only need a little work to reshape it if that was your thing. If you didn't want it, then, you know, it would just still be sort of in that ballpark. So let's get to the differences. This actually has mahogany back and sides, which of course is different than a real 335. It also has a 16-inch radius fretboard. Now this fact isn't necessarily apparent from the web page, but if you open up the PDF of the instructions and you look in there, they call for the use of a 16-inch radius block for use on the frets and the fretboard. And I think, reached out to StewMac, I'm pretty sure I did, and got a response, and they confirmed that the fretboard radius is in fact 16 inches. Now this isn't a bad thing. Martin guitars actually have 16-inch radius fretboards, so it is a widely popular fretboard radius, but it is not true to Gibson's 12-inch radius. Now this is something I really would like to bring attention to with this particular kit. It's something that I didn't notice for a long time when I was looking to buy one of these because I almost pulled the trigger. But if you look at the distance between the F holes and sort of the butt end of the guitar, it's way shorter. There's way less distance than a real 335. Also, look at the location of the output jack. It's not correct. And the tone knobs, so these would be the knobs that are the furthest south or the furthest towards the butt end of the guitar. They're sort of squished together to make up for the amount of distance that is lacking on the sort of belly of the guitar. And that's what really turned me off to this. When I realized that, I was like, something is not right about this. And I was able to put my finger on it. So besides the other things that are not correct about this kit, that was the one thing that really made me not want to purchase it for myself for my project. Okay, next let's move on to guitarkit.shop or Pango guitars, whatever. I'm particularly looking at the PHS-335 kit. They have sort of a variety of semi-hollow guitars, but this is the kit that looked most like a real 335. Now, some of the similarities are the body size and shape appear to be pretty accurate. It also has a flame maple veneer. It doesn't mention the plies, whether it's, maple and poplar or how many plies, and it doesn't differentiate between the top, the back, and the side. So I'm assuming that it's all some type of maple veneer, which is accurate to the 335. This does have a mahogany neck, so all good things. Some of the differences is it has a multi-ply binding. This is also something I didn't talk about earlier, but your basic 335s don't have multi-ply binding. They only have the white or cream solid color binding, no like black lines or anything like that. If you go up to the higher end versions like the 355, 45, those have a more ornate binding, but basic 335 just has straight single solid color. With this kit, there's no mention of fretboard radius, so you don't have any idea if it's 12 or 9.5 or 10 or whatever, 16. You just don't know what you're getting. Moving on to Guitar Fetish, which seems to be a pretty popular site for guitar part modifications, inexpensive kits and bodies, things like that. The similarities here are the body size and shape appear to be pretty accurate. It has a laminate maple body. I don't know what the layers are. The difference is the neck looks to be maple, not mahogany. There is no mention of fretboard radius, so again, you don't know what you're getting. And the only inlay option is the incorrect trapezoids. Again, I don't believe there are any 335 versions, or 345, 355, that have trapezoids. Those are basically a Les Paul and SG thing. Next is Guitar Kit World. Now the cool thing about this one is it has a standard or a customizable kit. And the customizable kit, you get your choice of neck and body wood, you get your choice of binding, choice of headstock, and choice of inlays. Now I don't think any combination of those can get you exactly a 335, but at least with this kit you have the choice. Some of the similarities here are a laminate maple body and a mahogany neck. So they got those basic body woods accurate. The differences here are an inaccurate body shape. So again, no matter if you customize or get the standard one, you're not going to get the same 335 body shape. There's no mention of fretboard radius. Again, you don't know what you're getting. Seems to be a pretty important thing that, as me as a buyer at least, I would like to know what the fretboard radius is on a guitar I'm buying. This one has sort of an odd headstock shape. I'll say again, this is a preference thing. I'm not saying there is a correct or incorrect version, but you can't argue that this one is not really close at all to the original Gibson headstock shape. Some models have abalone inlays, which are a much darker and more colorful inlay than the pearloid that the 335s have. The inlays, other than the dots, are wrong. They're either trapezoids or parallelograms, but starting on the first fret, where again we said pretty much all the Gibson 335s or similar models, the inlays start on the third fret. Moving on to the guitar fabric or guitarkitfabric.com. The similarities here are a 12-inch fretboard radius. Yay, we finally have a 12-inch fretboard radius, and the body shape seems fairly accurate. The differences are that the body is mahogany. Tone and the volume knobs seem to be in the wrong locations. Obviously I can't measure it, but I just get the feeling that they don't look right, and this one also has sort of an odd headstock shape. Okay, solo guitars. I'm looking at the ESK-35T model here. Now solo seems to be one of the more kind of revered kits for quality and workmanship. They might be a little bit more of a cost, but you know, you get what you pay for. So some of the similarities here, well, actually the only similarity is the body shape it looks fairly accurate to the 335. Differences are that the body has a poly sealer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, a lot of guitars over the years have done nitro over poly sealer, and it's not probably thick coats of polyurethane, it's just, again, a sealer. But as far as I know, and probably most people would argue, Gibson doesn't use any kind of polyurethane at all. Another difference is this one has a maple neck, again, not mahogany. It has a maple body, but it doesn't mention the ply or laminate. The output jack is definitely in an odd location. The inlays are trapezoids. Again, those are for Les Pauls and SGs, not 335's. There is no mention of fretboard radius, and the headstock shape is different, but it's actually pretty similar to the Gibson one. Oh, and this one has a weird sort of trapeze tailpiece instead of the traditional tailpiece. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about, I was actually the most excited about this one before I started researching into it further. I thought it would have the most potential. Precision Guitars is sort of known for being top-notch, quality woods, quality workmanship. You're going to get a really good guitar from these people, from what I've heard. Okay, so the similarities here are the body shape looks pretty accurate. It does have a 12-inch radius neck. Again, not very common with these kits for some reason. You are able to customize a lot of the features, and you can get a paddle headstock to shape yourself into whatever headstock shape you want. The difference is, and this one was really odd to me, the body is solid carved maple top and back, and it's the only option that you have. So typically a solid carved maple top is something that you see on a Les Paul, and so Precision Guitars have chosen to do a solid carved maple top and back, which to me seems like it will add a lot of weight unless it's really lightweight maple. There's no mention of weight in the descriptions here, so who knows, but that just seems really odd. That's not like a 335 at all. Also, oddly enough, the stock kit doesn't have binding on the neck. And here the trapezoid inlays start on the 3rd fret, which is typical for Gibson, but if you were to choose block inlays, they actually start on the 1st fret. That information is not really available on the webpage, but I did ask and I got a response from Precision Guitars, and they confirmed yes, the block inlays start on the 1st fret, which is not correct to Gibson. So thanks for sticking with me through all this. Hopefully my argument has been justified that there are essentially no guitar kits out there that are true to the 335. And that's why, of course, I have chosen to take the hard route and strip the finish off an Epiphone and make it into what I want, and just put the work into it, make it a project. So please stay tuned. This is going to be a process. You can see that I've been successful so far with the modifications that I've done, and I'm excited for the rest of it. Hopefully I don't run into any major hurdles along the way, but if I do, I'm going to show you all the warts and all. So stick around for that. Please like and comment and subscribe, and that's it. We'll see you next time.